This is a new day, BBD with news, views, geopolitical views. I had started yesterday to suggest the stance of India and how, what are our security implications and what should our security positioning be. I had suggested that Sri Lanka is really not that much of a threat perception, but our left shoulder is weak. Our left shoulder is weak because of the way Nepal essentially stands against us, and because of the influence now that China has gained in Nepal. And key to Nepal for China is a cartographic somersault or cartographic change of India's geography. And you've seen that starts from here, right? Lepule. And the threat is actually it goes all the way down here to the chicken neck, where, if you know, is a turmoil on Gorkha land. And then you have Sikkim, goes to Bhutan and goes to Arunachal Pradesh, right? So this works into, essentially, quite conveniently, into Mao's palm and five-finger policy. And Nepal and Kathmandu may be China's cat's paw to achieve that objective. And we have to be very careful, and we should ensure that we don't continue to look at Nepal with rose-tinted cultural affinity, religious angle. It has to be a clear, cold calculation of the damage Nepal can do to India, courtesy China. And that's what China may be after in the long run. And we have to be careful and ensure that our foreign policy towards Nepal now also gets linked to what China is doing and is done. And one of the key things Nepal should not be allowed to do is run away with the ownership of Buddhism, which China is essentially using Lumbini and investing all that in Lumbini, the birthplace of Buddha, to run away with that narrative. So one of the key things that Nepal and China are working on is, and what we constantly see in our newspapers, is this train to Nepal from Tibet. And my opinion has always been, and even in the earlier stages, that who does that train help? It's going to be an albatross of debt around Nepal's neck. But let's see what is being said by Amish Raj Mulmi. He says, why China has pinned its South Asia hopes on this train from Tibet to Nepal. That's interesting. Why has China pinned its hope? And says, economic considerations aside, the QTR is the culmination of more than half a century of Chinese ambitions on the Tibetan plateau. When communist forces occupied Tibet in 1950, Lhasa was better connected with India and Nepal than with China, which galled the early leaders. There's also a disconnect in how Kathmandu and Beijing each view the proposed cross-border railways. While the former sees it as a tool to extricate itself from the economic dependence on India, the latter sees it both as a tool of geopolitical power projection as well as an entry route into North India's populous markets for Chinese products. This is India's grip on, like the pipelines that are coming into Pakistan from wherever they come. If they don't end up in India, they're loss-making. Similarly, if this train does not reach North India, it is going to make no sense to China and China's investment at all. What does it say? However, the question of funding continues to plague the project. A pre-feasibility report submitted in December 2018 estimated the train would cost NPR, get this, 3.55 billion per kilometer, or NPR 28.55 billion annually for 9 years. The detailed project report, just the report itself, would cost 35 billion and take 2 years to complete. Nepal wants China to fund the DPR, but China wants to split the bill. But much of the initial, but obviously because this kind of money is like just will drown Nepal. It says, but much of the initial fervor around the train, Prime Minister Oli's primary election plank, has died down among funding issues and worries of a debt trap. Okay. On the Nepali side, there are a number of key issues. Apart from debt and infrastructure challenges, Nepal also has to negotiate the Chinese plan to extend the railways up to the Indian borders. If China's end goals from the railway are to reach India's markets, a train through Nepal may not necessarily make economic sense, especially if relations between the two heavyweights continue to sour past June 2020 Galwan violence. Further, even if a railway to Kathmandu is built, the question of what Nepal can export to China remains. And finally, as with many things related to China, the entire project hinges on Beijing's will. Nepal has admitted it does not have the requisite technical skills required to complete the project. If China believes Nepal's affiliations may be shaken by the US or by India's pushback, it may well step back and reconsider the project. India must ensure that the pushback is there by making it absolutely crystal clear, like in the ports in Sri Lanka, that if there any Chinese investment in either of those two, there will be no goods that will be allowed in through that area, as also no transshipments and transshipment goods from Hambantota or any other port in Sri Lanka which has Chinese ownership, folks. Basically, like I said, China, what we have to get into our foreign policy thought process is China is our biggest and present and clear and present danger and threat, right? And it's going to be working through Nepal, and it's going to be working through all the countries possibly can. Nepal is probably, to my mind, the most dangerous. I think we've gotten more or less a fair amount of measure of Pakistan for me to tell you that I don't think really it's a threat process, especially in the dire economic situation Pakistan is. And the other thing it really doesn't like is suddenly beginning to see these different organizations develop and relationships develop, and it's getting clubbed in with China, Turkey, Iran, and with Russia. And that really will ensure that it continues to stay in ferment, continues to stay in a cesspool of trouble. So I would say this part we've got fairly under control. Right out here by the change in structure, with Ladakh getting to be a union territory, I think we've gotten a measure of our head, and we are finally thinking a lot more clearly. The world continues to ratchet up the pressure on China. Time to get tough with China on global trade. UK at the G7. The other part that, like I said, in our foreign policy flux, we got to ensure that Russia does not continue to have a pole position in our thought process and a say in our foreign policy. And suppose here is what you got here. As an afterthought, Russia may seek to allay India's Afghanistan concerns. Foreign minister to visit next week, meet PM. But then what he says, Russian foreign minister to hop across to Pakistan after India visit. He must have got his tail twisted by China, and to send that message, right? But India continues to focus on Ladakh. It says Air Force holds formation in Ladakh, and it should continue to do so, because this is something that we have an edge with. But things are beginning to be problematic for Pakistan, because they have an outreach. We too want peace ties, Imran tells Modi. Imran writes to Modi for result-oriented dialogue with India. Then it says, then we had the first Pakistan delegation for the Indus water. Indus water is critical. In fact, Indus water should be a trade-off with Brahmaputra and what China is doing with on the other side. If they want, China can't have it both ways. Pakistan delegation on Indus water in India to hold talks. India must leverage the Indus Water Treaty for progress. Absolutely. Says the PIC format has become rather predictable, with China monotonously accusing India of water harm. Perhaps it's time to infuse some fresh thinking. India can take the lead by expanding the debate to benefit sharing such waterways, water wastage, water efficiency, or even setting up a study group to assess socio-economic gains and losses from the Indus Basin in the coming years. I think we've got to be, we've got to use this as not as a weapon, but as a trading chip. India rejects Pakistan objections for hydropower. General Bajwa, stable ties key to unlock potential. General outreach. There have been many false dawns in India-Pakistan ties, yet India must not miss the opportunity for a break with the past. Obviously, we should not miss the opportunity. But you got to clap with both hands. Pakistan Army Chief reaches out to India, says time to bury past, move forward. It sure is. But Modi did it before too. Kashmir, but it has to come back. Kashmir key to India ending Indo-Pakistan conflict, says Bajwa. Pakistan, now suddenly there was good news. Pakistan to import sugar, cotton from India. Cotton, let me just tell you folks, I think it's becoming important. They're going to have to import from India. Why? Because the cotton coming out of Xinjiang has been banned. So no, any textiles made from that will also get banned. So Pakistan's garment export business will take a serious knock. But pressure internally, in 24 hours, Pakistan does U-turn on lifting ban on Indian imports. Pakistan does a U-turn on Indian imports. But you know, the other thing that you might be finding is like kind of Pakistan seems to be losing the plot on Kashmir is India has rights issues, but situation improving in Jammu and Kashmir, says U.S. State Department. This would have given them a big hit. And there's another thing. A step in Pakistan's rational shift results of multiple pressures. This is important. The rethink coincides with fresh troubles for Pakistan's financial assistance dependency economy. The sweeping changes in West Asia, especially after the Abrahamic Accords, have left Pakistan isolated among countries that saw its brothers who would help out now and then with a moratorium on payments of oil or a loan on easy terms. But Saudi Arabia and UAE have been talking tough with Pakistan in recent months. China has rescued it a couple of times, and Pakistan is wary of borrowing too much from Beijing as others in the region. An IMF loan with tough conditions has helped the country stay afloat, but has not made the government popular. Pakistan has always viewed itself as a special country because of its location at an important crossroads between Asia and Eurasia. It has believed this could help achieve its strategic objective in the region and beyond. But let me tell you, this is for Pakistan, this is like in India's moment when the USSR split up. They are afloat absolutely without a rudder, because with the alliances now taking place, they are clueless, especially after the Abrahamic. Getting better for India in the United States as far as the opinion on Kashmir is concerned, right? And this has to be a gut-wrenching knock in the solar plex for Pakistan, right? So, but when we do things like this, which is Mehbooba is questioned by ED, she's denied a passport, this really leaves a bad taste in your mouth, and there's like one step forward and two steps back. And I know we're a much bigger nation than that. Now here we go. Tripping on geoeconomics, a really good read by C. Rajamohan. Kazi's conclusion that Bajwa's geoeconomic initiative towards a hegemonic and intransigent India can only indicate a lack of options is a bitter pill to swallow for an elite that has been brought up celebrating Pakistan's geopolitical advantage at the crossroads of the subcontinent, China, Russia, Central Asia and Gulf. Pakistan now stares at two disconcerting facts: the nation's long-standing neglect of geoeconomic and the steady erosion of Pakistan's geopolitical significance in the 21st century. What's happening there now, folks, is the same thing. They are in the high seas without a rudder, just like India was after the split of the USSR. No amount of nuclear weapons in its arsenal can fix the problem of the growing economic imbalance with India. Pakistan's relative economic decline was not limited in comparison to India. It also lost ground to Bangladesh. Today, Pakistan cuts a tragic figure in the region with its unending requests of financial support and deep resentment at the warming tides between India and the Gulf nations. Pakistan faces an even bigger challenge from the rapidly deepening Sino-US tensions. 5 decades ago, Pakistan was an important bridge between Washington and Beijing when the two sides normalized their bilateral relations. Indeed, Islamabad benefited from its strategic ties with Washington and Beijing, and now it's beginning to suffer. It was one thing for Pakistan to celebrate its all-weather partnership with China when Washington and Beijing were on the same side. It is entirely another to be tarred as China's vassal state when the Sino-US conflict is gathering momentum and India is rapidly expanding security cooperation with the US. Rawalpindi continues to love China, but its passion for America and the West is deep. Seeing Pakistan through the CPEC prism alone will be misleading. For decades, Pakistan has relied on China, the Gulf and the US to balance India. That strategy is under increasing stress amidst the shifting regional and geopolitical equations. The Gulf and the West are now widely believed to be encouraging Pakistan to reorient its India policy in a more positive direction. And folks, this is what it is. For Pakistan, at this point of time, is India's moment when USSR split. India was able to re-engineer itself and refocus.
Pakistan, unfortunately, is caught with old demons, and I think its hatred for India is just so short-sighted, it's going to drown it, folks. Jai Hind.